Hey, what's up, everybody? Brendan here for Red State. One of the most attacked communities in our society today is the gaming community, the people who love to play video games and create a culture around it. It is constantly being accused of all sorts of horrible things: racism, homophobia, sexism, typically from the social justice left, which has never been a huge fan of the gaming community. It sees it as a frontier of control, and they should, given the fact that the gaming community is the blue whale of subcultures. It has far more members almost than any other subculture on the planet, really. The gaming community spans the entire globe, multiple cultures, multiple time zones, and it typically does bring in a lot more revenue than Hollywood. I would say that video games are the great storyteller of today. It went from being books to movies and television, and now it's video games. And that's why they want to control the narrative within it. But in order to do that, it first has to make it seem like it is full of evil people and in need of being revamped, taken over, and controlled. And guess who? It's going to be the left, the social justice left, that should be able to control it. And this is why you consistently see gamers fighting back against the social justice community. Years ago, almost a decade ago at this point, you had the GamerGate movement, which fought back against the social justice left's attempt at controlling the games press. And they wanted to establish ethics in gaming journalism. It's something that the social justice left has never forgotten or forgiven anyone for, because it was their first really great loss in the culture war. GamerGate was. So to this day, you still have the social justice left attempting to come at the gaming community and prove that it is every bit as evil as they have always said it was. And this is why you come up with things like this right here. This is in the New York Post, released just a little while ago. People who identify as gamers are more likely to be racist and sexist, according to this study. A new study reveals that people who identified as gamers are more likely to exhibit extreme behaviors such as racism and sexism. While toxicity and radicalization has long been associated with gaming culture, the study, New York Post, got a little typo there, released last week by Take This, a nonprofit mental health organization working with the gaming industry and community, showed just how easily gamer identity can take over a person's life and where that can lead. When the gamer identity is core to who you are as a person, that seems to reflect what we call toxic gamer culture. It tends to reflect more exclusion than inclusion. So things like racism and sexism and misogyny. Research director Dr. Rachel Cowart told Vice Media. All of these things that we know exist in gaming spaces seem to be internalized by those who very closely identify as being part of that community, Cowart said. It goes on to talk about how the Anti-Defamation League tried to make the same claim. And to be honest with you, this isn't anything new, especially if you were around during the era of GamerGate. It's the same language. It's the same language. Misogyny, sexism, this and that, istophobes everywhere. And they're always trying to make it seem like the radicalization is happening in the gaming community and therefore it needs to be addressed. It has to be tackled. You'll see a lot of the same stuff happening nowadays when it comes to pretty much anything that the social justice left values and is getting pushback on. Recently, the Rings of Power, the people who run that god-awful show, said that the people who are detractors of that show, who denounce it and criticize it, are pure evil, and also accuse them of being extreme to the right. And let's go ahead and take a look at this study that they're talking about. Not just a game, identity fusion and extremism in gaming cultures. This has been led by Rachel Cowart. And I was looking over this earlier, and I want to show you guys something. Here's the method. It talks about the participants, the procedure. The measures are gaming identity fusion, willingness to fight, die for gaming culture, dark triad personality traits, which are like Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy, social dominance orientation, Social dominance, and this is where it gets interesting. Social dominance is a trait associated with far-right extremism and antisocial behavior in gaming spaces, including sexism and harassment. And then it dives into this: right-wing authoritarianism, right-wing identity, white nationalist identity, sexism, racism, recent aggressive behaviors, belief in QAnon. You know what's missing here? You can go and look for it yourself. No extremism to the left. No, they're not going to talk about any kind of extremism that might exist on the left with these people. You know, what kind of beliefs they might hold in something like Antifa or Black Lives Matter. No, it's all about the right. It specifically focuses on the right and the extremism on the right. So that should really tell you just how biased this is from the very beginning. Also, I think it's very interesting to bring this up. Here is Rachel Cowart, who apparently has it out for right-leaning anything. She tweeted this out back in September of this year. When your work makes Breitbart, you know you're onto something. Not going to link because it doesn't need more clicks, but the best part is when it discusses GamerGate as the 2014 movement against leftist bias and low professional standards in gaming journalism. So she has it out for GamerGate as well. Interesting that. The same people who used to fight against GamerGate and call everyone in GamerGate and the gaming community sexists and racists and phobes and ists and stuff are all kind of, she's using the same exact language as they are. So this is really just, you know, the GamerGate opposition rebirthed again. This is Anita Sarkeesian, the second coming, effectively. But here's where it gets really interesting. This was brought to my attention. This was published in September. DHS awards nearly $700,000 for research into extremism in gaming. The initiative is a collaboration between a handful of organizations. Dr. Rachel Cowart, research director of Take This, spoke to Game Daily about this funding. The Department of Homeland Security this week has approved a nearly $700,000 grant for an investigation into the connection between video games and extremism. Over the past decade, video games have increasingly become a focal point of social activity and identity creation for adolescents and young adults. The grant text reads, relationships made and fostered within the game ecosystems routinely cross over into the real world and are impactful parts of local communities. Correspondingly, extremists have used video games and targeted video game communities for activities ranging from propaganda creation to terrorist mobilization and training. So here's what we know. The DHS gave Take This and Rachel Cowart $700,000 into researching extremism in games, something that she took, and this was the research that came out. This is what they came out with. This is what the New York Post is now reporting now. People who identify as gamers are more likely to be racist and sexist. So we have a biased study from a biased researcher funded by a biased government attempting to bring down a community that is probably far larger and more diverse in beliefs, in race, in creeds, in gender than anything that they could more than they could possibly imagine. Now, of course, it's when you have a community that is that large, you're going to get some bad apples. That's unavoidable. But I've seen the gaming community firsthand. I've been in the gaming community for, well, ever since I was a kid. And I have met some of the nicest, most intelligent, warm, giving people I have ever met in my life. To sit here and try to paint this entire community as evil, as problematic, as toxic, well, it kind of makes me think that maybe the people who are trying to do that are the toxic ones. I have to wonder what their aim is in the long run. I know for a fact that the gaming community has been a pain to the social justice community for a long time. And it's not because they're right-wing extremists. Many of them aren't even right-wing. They just don't buy into this radical idea that the radical left wants to push on everybody. It consists more of moderates than anything else. But they want to bring it under their control. They want to be able to have their say within gaming culture. Because again, the gaming scene right now is massive, and it's, again, one of the great storytellers of our age. It'd be great if they could control any narrative coming out of the gaming industry, just like right now they're doing with the movie industry, just like they're doing with the television industry. So they're going to go after it. They're going to make it seem like it's a horrible, horrible community that is filled with racists and extremists to the right, and that it needs to be brought under their control and put under their thumb, that, these developers and studios need to hire these officers to come in and make sure that their DEI dreams are all being fulfilled, that all these boxes for the left are being checked. And this is how they're going to continue to try to do this. Of course, this is not anything new. This is same old, and has been the same for years now. They're going to continue to try to do this until they succeed. But each time they do try to do this, it just becomes more and more ridiculous. Less and less, for fewer and fewer people actually believe them. And that's the way it should be. The gaming community should be left alone. There's nothing wrong with the gaming community. Whenever anything bad in the gaming community does happen, the gaming community rises up and fixes it itself. It is filled with all sorts of different kinds of people. It does not need some people with a bone to pick. Especially, those who might have been around in GamerGate, or just don't they have that social justice stick up their butt. It doesn't need them coming in and telling them how to fix things. It doesn't need fixing.